Bum 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 a boom boom ba ba dum bum ba bum bum ba bum 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 ba dum boom boom ba bum bum ba bum bum ba bum bum. But
The disagreement was not only that. The disagreement was whether it only applies to Etzem Hoyer or to his Pashtus Hoyer as well.
Was that it? Okay.
That is the point of it. And I listened in. I was on conference. And what the Rebbe is saying is that his Pashtus Hoyer also is in that same category.
Even Achrei Tzimtzum?
And then ultimately Achrei Tzimtzum. Because Achrei Tzimtzum, the oil comes as a result of Chosev V'Heir.
So what's the Inyan? Okay, what's the I think I remember now after the show. I think after why it's called Salmeinu Tzura Atzmis, even his Pashtus or because the or itself is not giving any kind of thing of itself. It's only pointing back to the source. It's not. It itself is not its own substance. Something like that.
Yeah, right.
Needs to be clear. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't.
This explains the principle of Kiruv and all that. We'll discuss it now. You ready? Oh, okay. So I'll start where you ended up yesterday in that discussion. This second section on this page, AyinBase, begins by pointing out that Ayin there is also madrigas. And essentially, this is the Etzem Oyer and the Pashtus Oyer. Because as it is known that in terms of the references of the world references of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiya, that exists on a klolus level, in a klolus arena, so to speak, before it becomes defined in more detail. And Atzilus, the klolus, this is the Oyer Shelifnei Atzimtzum. And since Atzilus, as mentioned, the principle in Atzilus is Hu Gilui, that means that that in Oyer Shelifnei Atzimtzum there is the element of Gilui. And Gilui means it's essentially primarily applies to his Pashtus Oyer. Okay, this is basically what he says, but the logical progression in the Maimer is like this. Up until the second section, we have explained how Oyer is B'Tzalmeinu. We explained this whole phenomenon that Oyer is different than Kelim, and Oyer is B'Tzalmeinu because Oyer is B'Kiruv Elo Atzmos. I'm not going to go back the whole thing that we've discussed. And B'Kiruv Elo Atzmos means that the principle of Oyer is Etzem. There is no Oyer without an Etzem. And that's the principle of Oyer. It is Pashtus of the Etzem. And we discussed this in his Pashtus the other day. Now he comes back and says that, okay, this oil that we have now identified, we have now understood that it is all B'Tzalmeinu. In that oil, there are also madrigas. And principally the madrigas are etzem ha'oir and yispashtus ha'oir. Therefore, if we say that oir per se is a unit from tzalmeinu, therefore it means that includes yispashtus. But his pashtus oir also is a unit of the tzalmeinu. And this is why he goes on and says Hagam. And this is what led us into the following discussion. Okay, and I'm pointing to 6 lines from the beginning of this. The line begins with Bechinas Tzalmeinu, Bechinas Tzuru Atzmis. Chlolus O'er, Bechinas the Hagam, the Bechinas Ispashtus O'er, Hareise Bechinas Ha'ora de Ha'ora. Therefore, can you say, so to speak, that Ispashtus O'er also qualifies as B'Tzalmeinu, Tzuru Atzmis? It's only Ha'ora de Ha'ora. Nevertheless, that holds true. Because Oyer per se is a unit from Tzuru Atzmis. And we discussed and pointed out that Oyer is not only points, Oyer is etzem in an Oyer form. Even his pashtus Oyer. Ha'ora de Ha'ora. Even the oil that is pashtus and ultimately comes with his lapsus and kelim, as we have already learned, and that this is going to go on further to explain that even after the tzimtzum that applies, which is the oil that's mislabish and kelim, even there, the oil element is a union of B'Tzalmeinu Etzem. And I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but I want to conclude this whole statement, as we discussed many times, that going back to the moshel of Oyer, Tayash is the union from Oyer HaShemesh. Etzem is the Etzem HaShemesh. And his pashtus Oyer is the Oyer HaShemesh, as it is mispashet and transforms our world into a lit up world, into a world of light, which also be discussed. At that stage, when it actually transforms our world, it remains Ayin Etz Atzmi. Because world and light, as we explained, are two opposites. And that remains that way. The principle of light in the world represents the presence of the sun in our world. Not light, sun. Otherwise, we couldn't be late to this oil. What kind of entity, what kind of material is this? Where does this come from? How does it fit in our world? It doesn't fit in our world.
It's held up by the top. It's held up from the top.
It's held up from the top. It doesn't fit in our world because it contradicts our world. So a lit up world, that is the sun's presence in the world. And they don't really unite in the real sense of the word. This is why the Pasuk says, Hashemesh lememshel es bayim. Remember many times the point. Lememshel es bayim. It rules the by day. If it is mislabish and becomes part and parcel of the world, it doesn't rule it. It gives it of itself to the world. Ruling means the ruler stands aloof. I am the boss right now. Everything is going to be operated according to me, not according to you. That's meant to rule. So it gives the world a different perspective. It says, listen to me. That's essentially what a ruler is. And that's the meaning of light, even as we are experiencing in our world. There is, as we already discussed, another way, another level with which we relate and we interpret the light here in our world, where the light is just the deflective light, which is the energy that's contained in the light, that is deflected from the physical item, and that light becomes quote-unquote visible even to a camera, for instance, a lifeless entity. That is not light, that's energy. Light is the idea of light. The Shemesh quality aspect, which is visibility, that there is something that unites everything in the world, even though this is a separate entity from me. And yet I could see it at the distance from me. And not only I see that there's something that I see, I can relate to it, it's real to me. How is that? This is the effect of light, where everything is encompassed and united. Where the reality of everything is defined at the oil level, on a different level of truth, on the oil level rather than on its physical level.
Let's gosh, yeah. If we have artificial light that also you see the environment, you see everything pulling together, is that
not true? As we discussed many times, artificial light, candle light, does not give us the same experience as sunlight in terms of light.
You walk in here in a dark night and you turn on the lights, and
right.
Is that just simulating sun?
That's simulating sun. The reason that you have that response is because you know that such thing as light ultimately exists. But practically speaking, what you get is a deflected light. You cannot simulate sunlight. And as we explained, why can't you simulate sunlight? Because sunlight is not just the light that hits the object. Sunlight is what we call a pure light. All light that we have, the artificial light, is light coming from non-light. It's not the essence of light. Sunlight is light in essence. It was not preceded by not light. It was preceded by not light, but it was preceded by the etzem of light.
So from the artificial light, you don't get the sense that there's a place that's all light, or you don't get a sense that there's a place that's
I'm sorry,
from artificial light, you don't get a sense that there's this reality that's light.
That's right. It's reminiscent of that light, because it has practically the same effect in terms of a practical usage of light, but not your experience of light. Somebody who's confined in prison, somebody's confined within four walls, and he's got all the light in the world, and the room is lit up. Does he crave for sunlight? Of course he does. When he goes out to sunlight today, he comes back to himself. Artificial light is like being fed by rations, by injection, by intravenously. It's not the experience of light, of eating. Okay, so we will pursue, as I said, where you left off yesterday in your disputes. And then,
Rabbi Paltiel?
yes, Baruch.
Hi, good morning.
Good year.
So, just before you go on, so do we say that when you say that the whole union of oyer is etzem, and this refers to both the tzura atzmis, and this refers to both the etzem oyer and the hispashtus oyer, and when you say even oyer has madregas, in other words, this whole thing we're starting with here, this is talking explicitly about the oyer shalifnei atzimtzum.
Directly,
that's the
yes.
subject.
Yeah.
But your comment says this is true, but this also remains true of oyer, regardless of how far oyer goes.
Right. This is this is the development in this mimer. This is, so to speak, the logical progression in the mimer. We're talking about oyer, and then in general, and then we went back and we focused in general, even the oyer lifnei hatzimtzum, and we pointed out that there is oyer, etzem oyer, hispashtus oyer, and as we are going to now explain that hispashtus oyer also qualifies as betzalmein. Thus, that leads us into the next state, that even the oyer le'achar hatzimtzum still retains, because what is a tzimtzum? The tzimtzum is that all took place in hispashtus oyer. But hispashtus oyer is also a betzalmein.
So even after that hispashtus oyer, so the hispashtus oyer contains somehow tzura atzmis also, and even once it's mitzamtzim, it still retains that.
Even once mitzamtzim, that's right, and then nimshach again, it also still retains that in it.
Okay, thank you.
In the Tzimtzum, both the Etzema or and the Hispashtus or were withdrawn?
Yes. Yes. The tzimtzum primarily took place in the hispashtus oyer. Okay, so let's go inside as far as we can go. Again, we are starting at 6 lines from the beginning of the second section. The line begins, Hu b'b'chinas b'tzalmein and b'chinas tzura atzmus. V'hagam d'b'chinas hispashtus oyer, although that the hispashtus oyer aspect, harei ze b'chinas ha'ora, ze ha'ora. This is ha'ora da'ora. What is the great surprise over here? If we have a ha'ora of the etzem ha'ir, so then that ha'ora immediately points a finger, so to speak, on the etzem ha'ir. So you say that it has to do with the etzem, tzura atzmis. But this is ha'ora de ha'ora, which means that the etzem of this ha'ora is also ha'ora. What is a ha'ora? Again, let us bring back a certain, definitions. The principle of ha'ora is that this is that inyan on a functional level. This is that inyan describing the effect of its presence rather than its presence per se. That's been ha'ora de ha'ora. So if we're talking about the effect of its presence, where is the Ninya Ha'etzem there? Etzem has no effect. Etzem does not touch anything. Nothing can touch Etzem. And you be saying that the effect of that, the ha'ora, also qualifies it. That's what Now, with the principle of oil retains its essential quality, regardless of how far you extend it. Provided, again, I'm pointing out that we don't get lost, we don't lose sight of the oil versus the oil hamalubish b'kelim, the energy element, which is not oil at all. Okay, so let's continue. So this is directly pointing to this source, where it says that his pashtus oil is ha'ora deha'ora. And yet still, it still retains that bechina. Bibechinas. It is in that bechina of tzuro atzmis shekmoi ho'etzem, which is like the etzem. What is the Rebbe saying in these few words? First of all, hareze bibechinas tzuro atzmis. What would you have expected the Rebbe to say?
Harei tzuro atzmis.
Hareze bichinas tzuro atzmis. He doesn't say hareze bichinas tzuro atzmis, hareze bibechinas tzuro atzmis. What is the difference? The difference is bechinas tzuro atzmis means that tzuro atzmis. Bivchinas tzuro atzmis means that it retains the quality of tzuro atzmis. It's not a tzuro atzmis, but it only retains the quality of tzuro atzmis. And this is why the Rebbe concludes shekmoi ho'etzem. What does it retain? It retains the Ayin that it is a k'moi ho'etzem. It is a ha'ora de ha'ora. Oh my gosh. But it has shek bibchinas tzuro atzmis, shek k'moi ho'etzem. It retains the quality rather than the exact presence itself. And this is going to be explained. To help us understand this whole concept, the moshel that the Rebbe gives us a totally different Ayin from what I'm going to say. But nevertheless, just to give us a perspective in our mind to see how ha'ora de ha'ora can retain shekmoi ho'etzem, tzuro atzmis, no matter how far it goes. And that is the Ayin that we discussed many times, that even though we have this whole worldly structure where everything is held up one on top of the other, ultimately everything is held, the whole principle of being held up, of one thing is held up the other, is all based on one principle, and the Rebbe is holding it up. As we see, that's in Toile Eretz al Belima. Let us focus in and understand where that manifests itself and what it means. If we did not have the perception that things are the way they have to be, the way they should be, And if our perception we didn't have that depth of sense. Our perception would be that it has the physical structure. The table is held up by the floor held by the beam, the beam held by the wall by the foundation, and so forth. Our entire perception of world would be totally precarious. Maybe you understand what means precarious? Constantly questionable, constantly shaky. How do you know that this is still going to stand there? There is not a real basis for it to be. It happens to be. Anything that happens to be is not really deeply satisfying, deeply calming. You're constantly questioning the reality. In other words, like I once said, if we had that perception, we would, as we are sitting, we would constantly be getting up, walking up to the wall and see if the wall is still supporting the beams. But he decided to move away. Demonstrated by the following experience that we have. You stand on the subway platform and you know that trains come every 5 minutes. You have experienced it multiple times. Can you then refrain from getting up and taking a look if the train is coming? Why? Because you do not have the sense that that must be. It is. You don't have this essential reality. The whole coming with the train is a happenstance. If we sense in our world, no, this is not this is real, that is because all the way down to the deepest sense of reality that because it Torah Eretz Abima, this is the way the Rebbe wanted. This is what we sense. This is what gives us a sense of tranquility. Not because we can logically understand how this was sense. Even though, how far does this extend? Totally removed. You don't even have any kind of you never think of it. When you build a table, you're not even concerned how the table is going to be held up. You're concerned about the table, the 4 legs, that they should be even and solid. That's all you're concerned about. So that initial reality percolates as far as you can carry it. And it retains that quality. B'bechinas suru atzmos. Ultimately, when you put this down on the table, you're not relying on the table and the floor. You're saying, this is the way it works. This is the Torah. This is the reality of the world. And now, we will interrupt. Yes, Shmuel.
It seems such a confidence born of such an internal awareness would only be experienced by from a Yidden, because
no. Every person in the world, a human being, knows that the world is a creation. It doesn't attribute it to God or anything. It's a creation. That's what Seichel Anushi is, that we spoke about many times. The reality of the world is having been created.
It says Dafka Atzilus is the Ayin of Gilui. Why Dafka Atzilus and not Bria, not Yetzirah? Why is it only?
No.
Or is it?
Bria Yetzirah is a creation, is a Metzius. Atzilus is not a creation.
And how does that connect to Gil? Yeah.
But it has the Yin Hagil.
So even Atzilus says it. Definitely all the creation.
Definitely is a mitzvah. Okay, so have a good day on the line. Baruch, whoever else is there, Not bad.
What was the point that you made? Once the horse is lapshus, then it's not. It doesn't have this. Doesn't have the
It's